I'm saying that Senator Graham and others would view the UN's action as provocative, marginalize the Congress, and they would be risking the funding that they receive from the American taxpayer.
Risking is a lot different than saying they will.
I would suspend. Here's what I would do. If the UN did something that provocative, lifted sanctions before we ever got a chance to look at it in Congress, if they go directly to the UN Security Council, and the UN Security Council lifts all sanctions before we ever get a chance to look at this deal, absolutely I would suspend funding the United Nations, because I don't think your money should go to an organization that irresponsible.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining us now is Richard Perle, Senior Fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, former Chairman of the Pentagon's Defense Policy Board, and former Assistant Secretary of State. Richard, welcome, sir.
It's a pleasure to be with you again.
Well, always good to talk to you. So what do you... I'd like to start at the beginning, but I don't even know where the beginning is. What do you make of this insane rhetoric by this White House in response to a campaign? Not only has Netanyahu taken back what he said to a great extent about never a Palestinian state on my watch, but he's also now apologized to Israeli Arabs, yet the White House keeps referring back to what he said before he apologized.
Well, clearly this president doesn't like the Prime Minister of Israel, and he is allowing a personal distaste to distort American policy in a really unprecedented way. I can't think of another example in the many years I've been watching these matters. It is,
yeah, it is very, very upsetting and frightening if you want to know the truth. But what do you make of the effort now, or the threat? I mean, when you hear the President of the United States give a message, as he did via video for the Persian New Year holiday, to Iran, that all you got to do is sign this deal, which, by the way, gives you 60% of your nuclear capabilities. You get to run 6,000 centrifuges. We lift the sanctions, and by the way, you get your conventional weapons ban lifted too. All you got to do is sign that, and you could rejoin the League of Nations and be one of us, ignoring every other evil thing this country does.
Well, that, of course, is part of the problem. The administration has been so narrowly focused on the Iranian nuclear weapon program that they've ignored everything else. The irony is that this agreement, as we think it's shaping up, won't deal effectively with the nuclear weapons issue. It just leaves so many ways that Iran can continue to work toward a nuclear weapon. And I think Bibi Netanyahu was right when he said in his joint address to Congress that this does not block the road, this paves the road to Iran's nuclear weapons, because they'll keep the whole nuclear establishment in place. And the limits that are now under discussion are simply not sufficient to bring that program to a halt, or even significantly to interfere with it.
And what about this UN deal? What about the, it's not a legal document, Kerry testifies. The Congress, has no power to basically do anything to it. They're going to go to the United Nations, to the Security Council, get them to approve it. I mean, would that also, for something of this magnitude, be unprecedented in nature?
I think it would. Most presidents have recognized that to act against a significant segment of opinion in the Congress in this arrogant manner is not conducive either to his best interests or, for that matter, to the efficacy of the agreement he's trying to achieve. If you're going to be in on the crash landings, you'd better be in on the takeoff. And Obama is excluding from the takeoff people who he will need if there's a crash landing, and the likelihood of a crash landing is significant. I don't know anyone who follows these matters closely who believes that Iran can be trusted. So what happens if this agreement gets signed and 6 months later or 9 months later or a year later there is a further revelation about a hidden facility or hidden activity, as there has been consistently over the years? Where does that leave the president if he has treated the Congress in this way and relied on the United Nations rather
Yep.
than the people who elected him.
And finally, sir, what about the threat? Would a retaliatory measure be effective in cutting off funding to the UN? Would that affect the UN? Would that have any real any real consequences?
Yes, indeed, it would. The UN depends significantly on money from the United States, not only for its core activities, but for all of its subsidiary activities, and it's now costing us billions. So, yes, and the UN has in the past shown that it does not like to have its American funding reduced.
Yeah. Did you sign that separation document that Hillary they can't find when you left state?
Well, I was at the Pentagon.
Okay.
I'm sure I signed a whole slew of agreements. I certainly signed agreements promising to keep everything that was confidential.
Yep. All right, Richard. Thank you very much.
This was before email, when
yes,
it was not so easy to be careless.
Thank you, Richard Perle, ladies and gentlemen. Always appreciate talking to him. Next, folks, trial lawyer columnist Kurt Schlichter will join us. But first, let's turn now to Dr. Chauncey Crandall, and he's going to give us some tips on lowering your blood pressure. I know how to do it.
Hello, I'm back this week with this very important question. Is your doctor taking your blood pressure correctly? You may assume so, but a new study shows you may be wrong. According to this new research, doctors often cut corners when taking blood pressure and record readings that may be much too high. This is important information. First, if your blood pressure reading is wrong, you could be misdiagnosed with high blood pressure and put on powerful drugs for the rest of your life. You could also be denied health insurance, and your job may even be put in jeopardy. This is important information, so pay close attention. Number one, is your doctor using the right size blood pressure cuff? Cuffs come in two different sizes, average and large, but too often only the average size cuff is even used, even on the person with a larger forearm. If the cuff is too tight, the reading will be too high. Number two, is your blood pressure taken in both of your arms? Doctors are taught that this is not mandatory, but it should be. Even a small difference between the two pressure readings can mean you are at great risk of suffering from a stroke or even dying of heart disease. And number three, is your blood pressure taken when you are seated on the examining table with your legs dangling in the air? If so, your reading may be 10 points too high. You should be seated in the chair with your feet on the floor and your legs apart and relaxed. Don't cross your legs at either the knees or the ankles. Remember, if your doctor doesn't take your blood pressure the correct way, you could be putting your health at risk. Many of you already have my book, The Simple Heart Cure. So if you do, you can read all about high blood pressure in Chapter 8. That's my health tip for this week. I'll see you next week with another important Heart Health Minute.
Get your copy of Dr. Crandall's best-selling book, The Simple Heart Cure, for just $4.95 with his special offer. Go to www.simpleheartbook.com to get your copy today. That's simpleheartbook.com.